Throughout the past few months, I've been getting into this nifty little show called Death Battle thanks to friends and acquaintances. Granted, it's not enough to the point where I can say I'm a fan of the show, but I do enjoy watching it. 2025 wasn't my first time watching the show, as the first episode I watched of Death Battle was the Shadow vs. Ryoko episode during my college days. However, it wasn't until this year, thanks to a lot of friends, I got more and more into the show. While I haven't seen every episode of Death Battle 25, I can easily say that while the season had its downs, it was still a fantastic fucking season all around. There are some fights I want to discuss, and so why not make a list of my 5 favorites? And now, some rules to be put into play. First, animation and or fight choreography plays a big factor into this. How well does the episode do at presenting the fights, in my opinion, through move fluidity and camera work. 2. Interactions between the combatants also play a factor into this. Since you have 2 combatants fighting each other to the death, you gotta make sure that the characters have a really good form of chemistry with banter and other stuff to feel something for both sides. Those are 2 main rules here, but I do have a couple extras I want to bring up. Third, personal attachment toward any character or franchise does not affect the ranking whatsoever. There are going to be several characters on this list I don't know that well or have a personal attachment to, but that's not going to stop me from feeling something when these characters win or lose. Speaking of, 4. The final outcome also does not greatly affect the ranking. Death Battle has had several episodes over the course of its runtime where whoever won and or lost has not impressed most fans in the fan bases. And I can understand why, usually due to underutilization of the character and not really scaling the character all that well. There are many factors as to why a person does not agree with an outcome. I have shared my thoughts on the outcome of a certain Death Battle episode partially because of the verdict, but my overall thoughts are, if there was a verdict I disagreed with, yet the rest of the fight was spectacular, it'd only affect the ranking a small portion. And the final rule is, I'm not gonna be talking about the analysis portions at all. This is not because I find the analysis portions boring or anything. They are one of the most important factors for Death Battle, so that Wiz and Boomstick can analyze the combatant's strengths, abilities, weaknesses, etc., and put them into play for the fight in question. However, I'm not talking about the analysis portions, largely because I'm not an analytical guy, and because there are going to be franchises on here I'm unfamiliar with, and I feel like it's not in my place to discuss whether the analysis portions are accurate, inaccurate, or both. And I don't want to end up parroting others, so I'm leaving it out. Besides, when I come for Death Battle, I come for the battle between 2 fictional characters pitted against each other to the death, not caring about power scaling and other shit like that. But before that out of the way, let's begin. I don't really have a funny or interesting segue to get into the specific entry, so number 5 is the fight against Miles versus Deku. I watched this one a little bit later than others, around a couple months after its release, but when I watched it, I was not disappointed. But let's get my main complaints of this fight out of the way, and it's the reason why this is the lowest entry. This sound design for this fight was overall not that great. Many attacks felt like they didn't hold a lot of weight to them because the sound design didn't complement the strength and weight of certain attacks. It wasn't like that for the whole fight, but it did put this entry as low as it did. But other than that, this was a really great fight, considering that the animation was done by Moro, the same guy that made the Indie Cross series and did the animation for several of Death Battle's prior episodes like Phoenix vs. Raven, Gojo vs. Makima, and especially Bowser vs. Eggman. He absolutely cooked here once again. I love how the fight starts off with Miles' web swinging across the city in comic panels, and at the very end of the fight switches to a manga panel with Deku, complementing the media of where both characters originated from. There's also comic effects shown all around the fight, making it feel like an actual comic book brought into a Death Battle adaptation, and just the overall lighting and shading here is just so pretty to look at. The voice actors for both characters did an amazing job. John Van Doren in particular did such a great Deku. I genuinely thought the Death Battle crew got Justin Briner, who voices Deku in MHA's English dub. And the chemistry. Miles and Deku bounce off each other so well, and their intelligence really shines in this fight. It makes the death all the more emotional. Whenever characters fight in Death Battle, they kill with clear intention. But in this fight, Deku did not mean to kill Miles at all and feels complete guilt doing so. And that's what makes it one of my favorite deaths this season. That being said, I am fully well aware that Deku winning this fight was quite a controversial outcome, and people started the whole Deku Street tier meme because of it. I understand disagreeing with the outcome, but I seriously have never found this meme funny. Does the fight have its problems? Absolutely. It's one of the most mixed received fights of this season. You either love it, hate it, or think it's a mixture of both. Understandably so. But to me, while it's not perfect, Miles vs. Deku was a damn great episode, but even the streets fuck with it. I think it's funny that 2 entries in a row have a combatant from My Hero Academia, because I used to like Shigaraki vs. Mahito a little bit less than Miles vs. Deku, but the more that I thought about it, yeah, no, this is slightly better in my eyes. Much like with Miles vs. Deku, this fight was also animated by Moro, and it's so good. The fight taking place at a subway station for these two genuinely is the perfect place for these two to fight, and Moro complements the setting so well. We're starting off on the platform, then on the rails, then lunging into an ongoing train, and then back onto the train tracks. It's a good way to use the atmosphere while also maintaining the flow and utilization from both the abilities of Shigaraki and Mahito. The fight itself is also pretty wacky, yet also sinister. Starting off with innocent civilians literally having their heads explode by Mahito, Shigaraki gives Mahito his audition, and the fight begins. This fight does a great job at proving to the audience how insane these two are with their abilities and personalities. Especially Mahito. Sean Chiplock does a phenomenal job with Mahito, and Tom Schlock's Shigaraki performance is also top tier. There are so many great moments throughout the fight, such as the aforementioned head explosions, Mahito's attempted kiss at Shigaraki, the entire fight segment in the subway train itself, and especially the conclusion's build-up and the conclusion itself. Honestly, the second half is what makes this fight. Mahito taunting Shigaraki when using domain expansion, then the tables turning when Shigaraki sends Mahito to his dark mental world, All For One firing a blast at Mahito and breaking off his instant spirit body as distorted killing, and Shigaraki using decay to destroy Mahito's domain in a subway car. And then there's the conclusion with Shigaraki using decay on the subway tunnel and taunting Mahito as Mahito attempts to run away in literal fear, catching him and crushing his head, ending the fight. The banter between Mahito and Shigaraki is just so cool as these two psychos attempting to murder one another, but have a perfect sense of balance with both hating humanity for their own reasons and telling one another to grow up. Once again, the VAs did a great job for both sides here, and a great episode overall. It's been over a decade since Death Battle started, so at some point we were going to be reaching the show's 200th episode. Even with the changes in episode release schedules throughout the runtime, the series has managed to pump out episodes on a constant basis, and they, for the most part, absolutely deliver. For Season 5, Death Battle had its 100th episode with a remake of one of Season 1's most popular matchups, and the most iconic rivalry in video games, Mario vs. Sonic. And for Death Battle's 200th episode, this has been the day we have been waiting for. I've said in my reaction video that Ruby vs. Maka was my favorite Death Battle of all time, and granted, I think I was a bit too much in the moment since I just got done watching that episode. But goddamn, the Death Battle still fucking slaps in every way, shape, and form. While I absolutely did not know squat about Soul Eater prior to the episode, Ruby is a series I am absolutely familiar with, what with it being my favorite animated series of all time. And with Ruby being the last of the girls to have not been featured in a mainline Death Battle episode, this was a fantastic episode to have Ruby in, and still my favorite Ruby Death Battle. I gushed over the animation in my reaction, but can you blame me? This is one of the prettiest looking episodes of the whole series. The scenery fits so well for both characters, especially taking place under the moonlight sky, and the shine for both characters in a way almost make it look like something you'd see from the main Ruby series itself. But that's just presentation-wise. Fight choreography-wise, much like the presentation, is also something that looks like it was pulled from the main series. And Ruby is known for having fight animations that are fucking awesome. Movement and fluidity is just so good to look at, especially with the two scythes clashing against one another, and how both characters always keep moving. But much like with Shigaraki vs. Mahito, the second fight is where the fight really starts to amp up the hype. With Ruby and Maka going from ground level to the rooftop, and as the fight goes on, Maka's weapon, Soul Evans, is in the black room all dressed in a suit playing notes on the piano to transform Maka into her black blood dress, and as Maka figures out how Ruby's aura works, Soul plays the piano and the music changes as the two combatants continue dueling it out on the rooftop, and right before Ruby hits Maka, Soul uses Soul Adagio to disable Ruby's aura. But right after hearing Yang's voice, Ruby uses her silver eyes to try to finish the fight, but Maka has the upper edge, overcoming the wavelengths, taking out Ruby. holding her soul, realizing it was never evil and straying from the just path of her humanity like she thought, but a simple soul, and paying her respects to Ruby. Ruby and Maka have such great chemistry, alongside the chemistry between Maka and Soul. Sure, Ruby and Soul don't really interact, but it was really funny and cute seeing Ruby gush over the fact that Soul transforms as Maka's scythe, keeping her trait of gushing over weapons. The voice actors for Ruby, Maka, and Soul did a great job of their performances, bringing back Lindsay Jones herself to voice her character Ruby. For Ginger Sue's first death battle performance, she is a really great Maka, and returning from a Miles vs. Deku fights, John Van Doren as Soul Evans. And the music, oh my fucking god, don't even get me started on Death in Bloom. Not only did they bring back Lindsay Jones to voice Ruby, but they also brought back the show's main vocalist herself, Casey Lee Williams. Both her and Marae Sheltz were stellar in this. It has been 10 years since Ruby creator Monty passed away, and Death in Bloom is one massive tribute to the man himself. What's more is that Ruby vs. Maka was a matchup that Monty himself wanted, so this makes this battle even more special. It's not just the 200th episode of Death Battle, it's a love letter to not just Ruby fans, but Monty himself. Even if a character of my favorite series didn't win, at the very least, I knew damn well she put up one hell of a fight. And victory really is in a simple soul. At the very beginning of the video when I was explaining the rules to the list, I said that personal attachment to characters of series don't affect my ranking whatsoever. And that's a sentiment I stand by because your favorite Death Battle episode can be from franchises or characters you are unfamiliar with, and that episode made you learn about them and want to check out their series of origin. However, if an episode features combatants from two franchises you absolutely love so much, on top of that you find very little wrong with the episode, then yeah, you can expect how amazed I was when Dante vs. Clive Rossbeal was announced and released a month later. Really, the only negatives I have about the episode is the very beginning where the lip movements don't synchronize well in Dante's first line of dialogue, and the background track's first line of dialogue is also a bit off tune with the instrumental. But if those are my only negatives, it's very telling when the only problems I have with the fight have nothing to do with the fight. I think I can speak for myself when I can say how much of an absolute Campbell Core episode this is. Both combatants from two of my favorite video game franchises of all time, both in one way or another having fire-based abilities, an absolute dark and grim setting, and symphonic metal music. Buddy, this quite literally feels like future episodes I'm conceptualizing for my channel lore series, and I am all the more for it. I could go over the fight in excruciating detail because of how phenomenal it is, but we'd be here all day and there's only so much conversation I can handle before my voice gives out on me. This is probably my favorite 3D fight animation in Death Battle 25. Both the models for Dante vs. Clive, especially the double trigger and E3 transformations, are incredibly clean and crisp, and now that I say crisp, I made a fire pun, fuck my life. But the fight choreography is just astounding. The animator for this is Torian Crawford, who, if you guys don't know, was the main 3D animator for Death Battle, who is responsible for fights like the 3 Ruby Death Battles I reacted to, and All Might vs. My Guy, with his last episode prior to leaving was Blake vs. Mikasa all the way back in Season 8. So to say that he was the one who did the animation for this episode is so cool to know about, and man, he continues to hit the jackpot. It genuinely felt like Torian had so much fun with animating how the fight would play out, and it absolutely shows. This fight has so many references to Final Fantasy XVI, but especially towards Devil May Cry. And anyone who's played DMC can spot the references immediately. I know I did. I mean, it's so fun that Dante moonwalks past Ramu's lightning. How can you not love this? He's doing a Michael Jackson! The fight just keeps ramping up the intensity to where the scenery gets more and more destructive, to the point that when Clive transforms into Ifrit Raiden and Dante evolves Devil Trigger into Sin Devil Trigger, there's a section where both fly and fight up in space for a good period of time. At this point, I'm just fanboying, but can you honestly blame me when the spectacle shown here is this beautiful? And I reiterate, from characters in two of my favorite video game franchises of all time, Luca Xavier and Will Dorenzi Martin did a great job with their performances, and I especially love watching Luca Xavier react to the death battle in question. Love it when voice actors react to stuff they voice act in. And the music. Honestly, this track is my pick for the best episode theme in Death Battle 25. I have listened to The Devil Inside so many times now, it's madness. And yes, the first line in the track gives me Persona 5 dancing flashbacks from Groovy's backing instrumentals leitmotif of Wake Up, Get Up, Get Out there. That's really the only thing I didn't like about that. But other than that, the music is peak cinema. God, I seriously want to play Final Fantasy 16 so bad. Now, here's the controversial part of the fight. The ending. This is probably one of, if not, the most divisive ending in Death Battle 25. With people claiming that Dante should have won the fight, that Death Battle downplayed him, and that the fight was rigged in Clive's favor. And you got the other side that didn't mind, or were disappointed / sad that Dante lost the fight, but are accepting of Clive winning. For me, I'm happy that Clive won. I wouldn't have minded which side won, to be honest, as I was rooting for both. But if you did force me to pick, probably Clive slightly more. But I genuinely do believe that this was a fair fight with an equally fair outcome. Fun fact, Final Fantasy XVI's combat was inspired by the combat in Devil May Cry 5, and both games' combat systems were designed by Ryota Suzuki himself, who he himself has said in his opinion that Clive would beat Dante if they would ever get into a fight. Realistically, at the end of the day, who wins or loses is definitely going to be up to interpretation and subjectivity. Sure, there is objectivity you absolutely need to take into consideration when doing these matches, and especially in Death Battle, but not everyone is going to be on the same side of who's going to win. I don't care that Dante lost, but I understand why other people do. And to me, I think that's where the conversation should begin and stop. It's why I don't like getting into versus debates, because they can be handled very poorly so easily depending on the person in question. I just have my opinion and y'all have yours. I think what shocks me also is that with the intensity of this fight, this isn't even the final episode for Death Battle 25, rather the penultimate episode, as the true final episode would end up being Ash vs Yuki. I'm not gonna pretend I didn't write this entire video script before that episode drops, so yeah. This fight may not have been perfect, but goddamn, the team absolutely showed the passion and love for both franchises in this episode that, I'll be honest, I was so conflicted whether I wanted this episode or the final episode I'll be talking about on this list deserve which spot on the top 2. God damn, the devil did cry in his Final Fantasy, and I am all here for it, shitty puns aside. Those that watch Death Battle have that one episode. The one episode that got them into the show. Not their first episode, nor one that would have immediately made them a fan, but one that just made them intrigued by the show and got them to watch more. For many, it could have been any of the Goku vs. Superman fights, any of the Mario vs. Sonic fights, Bowser vs. Eggman, or even the very first episode of the show, 2010's Boba Fett vs. Samus. I've already said in the context of this video that my first Death Battle episode years ago was Shadow vs. Ryoko, but I stopped watching the series after Blake vs. Mikasa dropped and before Iron Fist vs. Poe. I did watch Bowser vs. Eggman, but that didn't get me back into the show. However, I got back into the show years later when Simo Madiga vs. Kyle Rayner dropped. And it's number 1 for a reason, so you absolutely know this is my favorite episode of Death Battle 25. Since I don't know how to even begin with this, I guess I can get my only negative out of the way. There were a couple noticeable cuts in the background music of the fight that were kinda immersion breaking, but aside from that, Jesus fuck this fight. It's typically known to be a spiritual successor to Season 6's Ben 10 vs. Hal Jordan, one of the most divisive and disliked death battles ever, and even this death battle makes a couple jokes at how bad that episode was. Honestly, a part of me just wants to break the analysis rule just once, so that's what I'm gonna do. Even though I cannot judge the accuracy in question, which was the primary reason I set that rule up to begin with, holy fuck, Simone's analysis portion in particular was absolutely nuts. The moment they were talking about how insane his overall calculated speed feats and everything that happens, including how nuts spiral power is, My jaw was on the fucking floor. Both Simone and Kyle are quite possibly two of the absolute strongest combatants Death Battle has ever had on the show, and the fight complements this to a tremendous level. Cosmic stuff and reality breaking has been done on the show before, but I don't believe it was ever to this extent. Let me list off what I consider to be the craziest moments. Simone transforms Gurren Lagann to Tekken Toppa Gurren Lagann, bursting from a galaxy and emerging into the Super Spiral universe. Simone lowering his leg at Kyle, about to crush him in the Super Spiral universe through the hole in space-time. Kyle emerged to the Super Spiral universe after concentrating enough energy by channeling the power into his ring, going from a Green Lantern to a White Lantern. Clashing swords of the Super Spiral universe, and one moment Simone jumps on a fucking universe to punch Kyle, regaining control after Kyle flung him through space. Approaching the source wall, Simone uses spiral power to form a massive drill and unleash a Tengen Toppa Giga Drill break at Kyle, breaking through the source wall and into the life equation. Kyle summoning the powers of the emotional spectrum, firing beams of energy at Simone that all merge into one. After seeing Kamina, Simone transforms Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann into Super Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann, aka the mech's final and most powerful form. Simone using Giga Drill Break on Kyle, and Kyle decides to use his own version of Giga Drill Break with the emotional spectrum, and them clashing exceeds infinity and causes reality to fucking break, falling through two rifts back to Earth at the canyon where the episode started. Yes, that's how insane this episode gets. It is mind-blowing, and the execution of all of these ideas works superbly. The hand-drawn animation is smooth and so well done, with the overall fight choreography just being absolutely nuts to complement it. There are so many hidden references in this one fight that I cannot physically list them all. Simply go to the Simone vs. Kyle Death Battle wiki page and you should be able to see all of the references listed off. The voice actors did a phenomenal job with Simone and Kyle, especially Brandon Acosta as Kyle. And then, the ending. As they return to the canyon now broken by Simone vs. Kyle's infinity destroying clashing, they both settle it with their fists and end it once and for all with drills. And I mentioned Brandon Acosta as an especially for this, because he not only performed what I consider to be the best performance of a Green Lantern OVA I've ever heard in anything, but quite possibly my favorite acting delivery in all of Death Battle. Just listen to this beautiful shit.
In brightest day, in blackest night, no evil shall escape my sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power. Green Lantern fly!
The two drills shatter from the force of their powers, and Simone immediately overpowers Kyle, exploding his arm and charging up spiral energy one last time to punch Kyle square in the cheek with enough force to shatter reality and revert Kyle back to a Green Lantern. This build up to the death, and the death itself, was just amazing to witness. Quite frankly, I'm surprised that this battle was not even the final episode of Death Battle 25. No. It was only the season's 5th fucking episode. That's wonderful. I would have expected quality like this out of a season finale for Death Battle, but goddamn. And then there's the episode's theme, Spiral of Emotion. Oh. If The Devil Inside is my favorite music track of the season, this is easily a very close second. I think it's nuts that this ended up being the first Death Battle episode I came back to the show properly after Blake vs. Mikasa in Season 8. It was such a close spot between Dante vs. Clive and this episode for a reason, because both have aspects I'm very much biased on. Dante vs. Clive being a massive Campbell Core-toned episode, featured two of my favorite franchises, and Simone vs. Kyle being the episode that got me back into the show, and trust me, I could have put both at number 1 if I absolutely wanted to, but I had to pick a winner, and that winner for me was Simone the Digger vs. Kyle Rayner. Seriously, just who the hell do you think I am? I'm User1Campbell, and I think it's very telling when 4 out of the 5 episodes on this list have deaths where the winner shows respect to their fallen opponents. You can tell what type of Death Battle episodes I absolutely love based on that alone, and I am not ashamed to admit that.